the Track C, the second session on Track C, Culture and Conduct Assessment. And on this topic, we have with us Mr. Devendra Bagree. He is the Senior Vice President of Standard Chartered Bank. He's a Chartered Accountant. He's a CPA as well, and a Certified Fraud Risk Manager with about 18 years of experience in auditing, finance, operations, and risk management in the banking industry. He is currently the Head of Audit at Standard Chartered Global Business Services in India and Poland. And he is working closely with the COO in driving the audit practice and strategies in India. He is also functionally leads the audit risk reporting team, covering various requirements within the group internal audit. He is heading a team of 60 professionals, and outside his audit work, he has been appointed as the Employee Resource Group lead for GBS India with an objective of working towards enhancing careers for the people with disability. I think he loves to travel and experience different cultures and read books. So let's hear from Mr. Devendra. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is everybody able to hear me? Yeah. Okay, that's really good. Okay, the topic for the day is culture and conduct, as you see. I know we are running a bit late, so it won't be good culture and conduct if I stop your lunch, right? So I will try and keep it short and try to fit it within the time, right? So that you can all enjoy a good lunch. You've all been here since morning. It's quite cool in the room, so you will all be hungry at the end of the session. But in any case, let me just give it a start. I know people are still walking in, but just in terms of culture and conduct, right? If you kind of think about this topic, right, it doesn't naturally occur to you when you think of an audit function, isn't it? How many of you gone back, say, if you go back 5 years and think about culture and conduct, you would have said, yes, that is the audit I want to do. Nobody, right? And even today, people wonder, how do you even audit culture and conduct? Because it's so much of a behavior, isn't it? Somebody does something wrong, that's already found in the audit issue. So what's culture and conduct? So it is about, at the end of the day, behaviors, right? It is at the end of the day about the tone at the top. It is about what the organization is for and is not for, right? So these are some of the things that you need to bear in mind. So where is all this coming from, and where is the need coming from, to kind of really start assessing culture and conduct? The biggest reason for all of these is, what people have realized over a period of time is, a lot of things that go wrong, a lot of companies that actually collapse, a lot of things that don't work well, somehow find their way back into culture and conduct. I don't know, how many of you heard of the Barings Bank? Yeah? Collapsed. Enron, I think everybody's heard of that. You can talk about missing controls, you can talk about, missing things, so on and so forth, right? But what happened there? At the end of the day, if you come back and see, people didn't act in good faith, right? It was conduct at the end of the day. Yesterday morning, I was just going through some of the articles, and you saw Trifigura, the commodities trader, has actually had some wrongdoing in that organization as well, right? Without going into the details of what happened, because the case is still on. Again, at the end of the day, if you go back and analyze, what do you find? You find that somebody has not acted in good faith. So all of this put together has now, rejuvenated the focus on culture and conduct. And if we start now placing emphasis on this, you will start to realize that you're sort of an auditor that can give a complete perspective. We were always about numbers, right? 1 voucher missing, 10 vouchers missing, total is so much, this is the loss to your company. Now we're also going to talk about the softer things, right? How is your organization structured? What doesn't work? These people push back, they don't have understanding of risk. Are you not talking about all of these things at organizations? When I get into, say, a committee forum, right, when we are discussing at the bank, the first question is, what do you think is the culture of my team? That's the first question. They don't ask me, tell me the list of issues that you have found. That is the first thing they ask me. How's my team? That's what they're interested in, because right behaviors will always drive right outcomes. That's what we know. Okay, let's start to get into this, right? Now, this is what I was talking about. So if you look at this iceberg, right? actions, behaviors, and decisions. What is it talking about? Right? This entire slide actually can cover the presentation. So if you said you've understood this, we can stop here and have early lunch, actually. Right? So that's what it is about. See, what happens is, at the end of the day, culture is something that's set at the top of the organization, isn't it? We all set our own cultures. We all come from all different cultures. But the organizational culture is actually set at the top, right? It has to be set at the top. If the organization culture is not set at the top, what happens? Free for all. We can do what we like, right? If an organization like, the previous speaker was talking about Tata, and we can all associate it with culture, right, as far as that organization is concerned. So that's where that becomes the foundation, right? And then what happens is the conduct associated with that culture becomes extremely important. I'm struggling with this, but as long as you can hear me, that's good. So that is how it starts to manifest in the organization, right? Now, if you start seeing bad behaviors, then what happens? Then what happens? Then you've got to understand that there is emergence of behavioral risk, right? This is a new concept again. We have spoken about market risk, liquidity risk, operational risk, but this is new in the dimension, right? It is behavioral risk. So what is the impact of behavioral risk is something that one must understand. The IA standards also now have a full guidance in terms of how you deal with behavioral risk, right? Why did they come up with it? Not for nothing, because they realized that culture and conduct ultimately drive a new risk in the organization, which is called behavioral risk. So we've all got to now start paying attention to this and bring it up in our audit reports, presentations, meetings, and then you'll realize and see the value that if you change certain behaviors, you can actually influence the organization to do better things. Right? That is something that has recently emerged. We'll move forward in the discussion and see how it has actually moved forward. Now, what are behaviors and what are we talking about in terms of behaviors, right? That is actually important. It's difficult to define, right? The difficulty with this topic is how to present, because it is so abstract, right? So you'll have to kind of think about ways of saying, okay, what does culture, conduct influence, right? We're trying to explain to you in different way. One, the iceberg; second, the egg, right? Ultimately, it's a plate, and then you walk there and you can eat. Right? So still preparing the dish, but it's difficult. It's really difficult to do that. So if you look at behaviors, like let's take a couple of them. You understand all of this, right? If I ask any of you, you'll say, yeah, I understand all of this. But how do you bring this together from an organization perspective, right? That becomes absolutely critical. And again, don't undermine this risk. I keep saying this. The reason is that it's not front and center of focus for us, because the numbers are important. If you walk in and don't present a number at all at an audit committee, what happens? They feel you have not done anything. Right? That's the focus, right? But if you start attributing numbers to behaviors, if you start attributing issues to behaviors, you suddenly start being more powerful, because you start to influence the culture in the organization. You have the power to influence it. Whether it changes, doesn't change, it's management's decision at the end of the day, but you start to influence it. Did you have this influence 5 years back? Not at all. You looked at it, you said the process is broken, go fix it. Yeah, of course, in a fraud scenario, you would have come up with 1 or 2 instances of who did it, and they are bad people or good people, and then HR deal with them and exit them from the organization or do whatever is right. But now you're starting to talk about this in transactions, in behaviors, you're starting to talk about, in your presentations, you're starting to talk about value addition. These are aspects that will really value add in your organization. As long as the tone at the top is right, if they care for people, they care for their reputation, they care for how they want to conduct the organization, then this can be extremely powerful as far as organizations are concerned. Now let's take, for example, consistency of actions. People behaving in an irrational way, is very important for us to identify. Right? You've got to be consistent. One day you tell me that, yeah, this is not an issue, you'll completely argue about it. But you'll go back and tell somebody else in your team and say, yeah, this is an issue we got over the auditor. That doesn't set good culture and behavior. How open are you to being able to come under scrutiny, to be able to get analyzed, and then to be able to then say, yeah, these are the issues, we'll deal with it. Right? at the expense of not fearing that you will lose your job or something like that, isn't it? So that actually is very important for you to consider. Let's move further. Like I said, culture is the key. Now, if you look at Bearings and Enron, right? To some degree, it was what? A hero culture. Right? These were the guys who were driving everything. In Bearings Bank, right? Nick Leeson was one of the traders, and what he did is he had access to a lot of management information, and he was actually very influential. Right? And then what he started to do is he started to do things that would enhance the profitability of the company, okay, with his trading ability, without regard for any controls whatsoever. Right? There was no segregation of duties. He could actually perform the trade. He could actually talk to the clients. He could actually influence the reporting to management in terms of profitability, loss, etc. And he could actually run through a transaction end to end. What does that tell you about an organization? Absolutely lack of controls, and you would end up reporting that, right? But when they went off and analyzed, they saw what's the organization culture, right? It's a hero's culture. He's the one who's making the maximum amount of money. He's our celebrated hero. Nobody touches him. Of course, that's true, right? That is true. Nobody touches him. Imagine the most profit-making employee of your organization is someone you start to question. What's going to happen to you? That's it. Nobody's going to listen to you. Nobody's going to talk to you. Right? That's what led to a bank, one person, completely collapsed. Right? So that's the kind of influence behavior can have in the organization. Now, if you look at the financial crisis, right, of 2008, all of you have heard of that, some of you have been through it, right? What happened there? A lot of culture, organizational culture. What is the culture? Profit making at any cost. Profit making at any cost. If it meant that the average person on the street, has to put all his savings into a fund, and we were to wipe out that fund completely so that that person is on the street in 20 days, it's okay. It's okay. Why? Because we met our profit targets. We can enjoy the bonuses. The auditor goes in and says, what's wrong with the process? Nothing. There was a target, there was a due process, products were sold, profit was made. Everything was recorded in the books. Tick, 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 tick. But then came in a regulation which said, start to assess suitability for the clients. So suitability actually became a concept. Suitability was a concept in the medical industry. Right? What drug are you giving and how you control that drug. That because it was saving lives. Right? And in this case, you're destroying lives. So you also needed a pharmaceutical pill to be able to protect the organization from destroying people on the street, right? Or literally killing people in inverted commas, right? So what happened there? The regulators came in and they said, we are introducing something called suitability risk. What was that down to? Actually, if you see the underlying, that iceberg that you saw, the underlying there was behavior. Right? Because absolute disregard for human values is what? Behavior, right? It isn't accounting standard. It's not, none of that, right? It is completely about behaviors. And that's when the boards started to form a committee called suitability committees, never heard before. They were going to assess the impact on client and society of what actions they are taking. Do our traders get too much of liberty and leeway to be able to do anything to maximize profit? The suitability committee started to sit and then started to decide whether this transaction is suitable for the organization and does it tie back to the culture of the organization. The first time this introduction was done because profits were excessive. People were foreclosing their mortgages and not having money to pay. Right? It was a crisis of that magnitude, which there are consumer court cases even till date. There was one more interesting incident, right? One of the organizations, without naming them, though it's a public information, they went off and opened 500,000 savings accounts for customers without asking them. Remember, back in the days, sometimes a credit card would be dropped home. They would say, if you use it, it's yours. If you didn't use it, it's okay. Right? They took a chance. They said, let's drop 100. Maybe there are 20 users will pick it up and swipe it somewhere. Good, one customer added. But in this case, it was an American bank that said, let's go off and open accounts, 500,000 accounts without consent of clients. They just went off and opened it. And now they're calling, chasing clients to put some money. Now that you are our clients. What was the idea there? I have my sales target, I need to meet it. Did they think consumer there? Does that the right behavior in the organization? No. Is that a risk? It is. But if you look at the due process, yeah, it's fine. You reached out to the client. If the client deposits the money, great, you have controls. If the client withdraws the money, you have controls. When you onboard them, you'll do some background checks. There are some controls. But what you haven't understood is that it doesn't even link back to the culture of the organization. Isn't it? So that's a pretty big deal from that perspective. And like you see, the actual organization culture and the employee behavior will lead to the conduct risk, which is what we are always worried about. Bad conduct. Right? Now, this is what I was talking about. Financial impact of culture and conduct risk. We have to monetize everything, right? Otherwise, when you get out of this room, you will feel like I was in a psychology class or something like that, right? Unless you break an association with numbers. I have to also be very careful as a presenter that if numbers are not there on a presentation, I will lose the audience. Where is the P&L? Where is the balance sheet? Right? So this is where I have to bring the association back to you guys. So if you look at this, there is a timeline. And of course, ignore the names of the institutes, though it is public information. We are not here to take any names, but look at the fines, right? Look at the fines. It says, misleading a debt offering. What is misleading? Sounds like a behavioral issue, right? Looks like a conduct issue. Let's go further and say, foreclosure practices, Feb 9, 2012. Look at that at the down, foreclosure practices. It doesn't say procedures, it talks about practices. Very carefully chosen word. What's the practice in your organization? It's a behavior. It's something to do, something connected. May not be absolute, but may be connected. Right? Over residential mortgage-backed securities. All of you would have heard this term from the financial crisis. What are these? Mortgages. Mortgages were on houses. So something to do with people again. What is happening? 16.6 billion sales. What happens in sales? Interaction with customers. It's a practice behavior. Sell them anything. They were opening the windows and calling customer, come, I'll give you a loan. Take the house. Because I have to meet my target. Documentation requirements were not there. Culture of the organization is meet the target. After that, bundle everything on your balance sheet. The word securitization, I don't know if you've heard of that. Bundle everything on the balance sheet, sell it to a third party. Right? Factorization, you would have read somewhere, right? Something like that. Right? Bundle everything, sell it to a third party. Now the third party gone. Customer gone. What have I done? Made a lot of money. Possibly. Right? Right? So these are kind of things that we need to keep in mind. So this is not small change. Back of the pocket, this can actually mean 10 to 15 companies together, one fine. You understand? So this is the seriousness that we have got to. Right? That somewhere within this, there is a cultural aspect, there is a behavioral aspect, there is a conduct aspect in each of these. There are plenty of examples. Right? But what I wanted to draw your attention is that these practices are driven off behaviors of culture, etc., culture of excess profit taking. Could be a cultural thing, right? I just want to make money at any cost. But some organizations say, no, it's okay if I make a loss for a year. Remember during COVID, a lot of companies said, okay, we are not going to take away our employees, though there is no sales. We will pay them for an extra year. They were not looking at ROI, ROE, all of those numbers and saying what will happen to my. They were simply focused on employee well-being. That tells you a lot about the organization. Tells you a lot about the organization. Is it about numbers? Is it about standards? Is it about standard 16 that told you keep employees when COVID comes? Nothing like that. Right? It was just driven off pure cultural aspects. That boardroom probably had the right people with the right mindset and saying, let's save people first and then worry about our profitability. Right? So that's the way it started to work. Now, yeah? Now look at this, right? We've just taken a simple example of saying, yeah, we live in a global world, right? And I'll explain this example to you. As we go along, let's all try and understand this, right? So it'll be interesting. So if you look at this, is that, in the UK, there is a lot of office-based working, right? And then somewhere in between Singapore and Hong Kong, there is full-time work from home, right? Now you see, there is a cultural difference, isn't it, between the organization? What does it do for an auditor, tell me? These are also important aspects. What's the culture of your organization? What risk will this drive? Office-based working may be driving certain different types of behaviors versus full-time work from home may be driving different types of behaviors, isn't it? So are you not involved in all of this? Shouldn't you all be involved in all of this to assess and understand what behaviors get driven off these policies? Yeah, I'll give you an example. Thank you for raising that, sir. See, for example, you're dealing with a merger and acquisition, not announced. It's not public information. And you have your banking deal person sitting at home and working on that particular deal. Would you be comfortable? Because you don't know, there is no supervision in terms of what is happening. Who is around him? Is he sitting in a cafe? Is he sitting outside another company with his friend, trying to do things? Whereas in the office environment, he would be locked in a glass door. He wouldn't have his mobile phone even to take a picture. When in all of these places, what happens is, some of the new technology, sir, is that you take the camera in front of the screen blanks out. So that you can't even capture information. You can take it to that extreme today. So that means if you're working on something that's very private, confidential, sensitive, and can draw, the market to behave differently, or information that should not go out has gone out sooner, I want to keep it in a controlled environment rather than leave it free. I'm sitting on an airport and discussing onboarding the most important client. That doesn't speak very well of an organization, isn't it? So these are things that we will have to think about, that though this is a policy, we are all very happy with the policy, allow me to work from home, but what is the behavior it is driving? That is very important to understand. Similarly, if you kind of think about speak up culture embedded, facilitating escalation and timely issue. What are we talking about here? There is a speak up culture. They didn't say there's a speak up policy. What are we talking about? Speak up culture. That tomorrow if you see something going wrong, you can go to a speak up, whatever committee or whatever you want to call it, or a hotline, and you can express yourself without being identified and then having backlash for that. That speaks of a culture of an organization. But if you realize that, you leave something there, nothing's happened, you automatically try to understand. So that's why in a lot of HR type audits, what do? We'll go back and see, have you addressed the speak up cases? But if you think about it, what are you trying to address there? Any numbers? No. Maybe somebody beat up somebody on the floor. No numbers. But is that accepted behavior? Somebody uses abusive language. Right? Is that, that could be a speak up case, isn't it? Could it not be? You have the posh. What is that? Behavior. Why was that instituted? Because there was bad behavior in the organization. Posh never came up 20 years back. I never heard of posh when I started off. Yeah, you would hear one-off cases and then you're like, it's not prevalent. Today there's a committee that's sitting. Why did that happen? Because things are surfacing. People need redressal. If you don't have a redressal mechanism, what do you talk about that organization? You don't look at P&L then and say, wow, 100 million profit, no posh committee. Though it's mandatory, so now you can't avoid it, but I'm just saying, there was so much enforcement to even make it mandatory to drive what? Not profitability. Regulators didn't say we will drive profitability by putting in a posh committee. It's more an expense for them. What did they say? We are putting this to drive right behavior so that every employee in the organization can come and fully express themselves without being victimized at any point of time. So what is that? Regulators are also driving right behavior. They are not saying this will enhance your profitability or this protects the consumer. None of that sort. Right? Yeah. Very much.
You have Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z in the organization.
Totally.
And it makes a lot of difference there as well.
It's a fantastic point. See, a lot of times why boardroom discussions have come, you see a lot of articles, right? How to handle millennials in an organization. How do you handle means what? Tell them to do their job. That is how you handle millennials, isn't it? But does it work with that? No. You need to deal with the WhatsApp generation, that's what I call them. In a different way. They'll be talking to a client and at the same time messaging to their friend. What about evening? What are you doing? And at the same time to the client, what do you want? Right? The way they speak is very different. Right? The way they address their clients is very different. So what he mentioned is absolutely true, right? There are so many examples, right, we can bring up from daily life that we see, but that generational thing and trying to manage them is very interesting. Right? Now, if you have a very young team, right, and if you get someone like me inside that, problem. Old man has come. Misfit in the team. Suddenly they'll realize, oh, he's got some old way of thinking. He doesn't understand our problems. Right? So you can't do that anymore. You'll have to even think about those things that, is my team mix right? Is that going to P&L anywhere? Journal entry? Nothing. No journal entries for that. Right? Where are we going with that? We are simply going off and saying, does this drive right behaviors? That's all. Right? So now coming back to, since we are in an II conference, we have to refer to II material as well, isn't it? So we can't devise our own. So we'll have to make sure that there is some reference, and you take back that there is actually reference. So we'll bring that reference in terms of what is going on here. So actually the International Professional Practices framework, right, provides identifiable key risk factors arising from cultural problems. You see, this is a very specific and well-defined, item for cultural problems. Right? It's not for not meeting standards, for cultural problems. So if you look at this, employees' lack of knowledge of key inflexible hierarchy. To your point, sir, maybe there is someone from the generation behind who feels, no, I am a senior, you have to respect me as senior. This generation says, I don't even respect people at home. Where is the question of respecting you? Right? Who are you? Right? So those are kind of differences, right? So they're talking about inflexible hierarchy as being a problem. Again, no P&L here. Then, this will never happen to us. This has never happened to us before. Why will it happen to us? That's culture. When you're sitting in a boardroom and say, oh, this scenario is not possible with our company. We will never go down. You have to immediately start sensing that they are not fully appraised of the underlying risk. If you're sitting in that boardroom, you have to start thinking, they are not fully appraised. How, as an auditor, I can get in, or as a consultant advisor, and start to inform them that there is a problem here. Right? So these are cultural problems, right? Unreasonable expectations and deadlines. We spoke about this. Get me 500 million, do what you want. Burn 100 houses, but get me 500 million. Right? Financial crisis of 2008, perfect example. It's a life lesson for generations to come of what has happened. Right? We'll move on quickly. As I promised, we shall do lunch on time, driving good behaviors. So if you kind of look at this, some insights again from a supplemental guide published by the IIA. It talks about how would you audit culture and conduct, right? This is the most difficult part. That's why I kept it for the end, right? So that we can go over this. See, now things like assessing organization programs for communicating values, strategies, and objectives. So does the organization even have a program to communicate its values, say through a training, through getting working groups together? When you make that assessment, you have to talk about it, and this should be part of your audit universe item. To say, I'm going to look at programs that are going to drive right behavior and outcomes in the organization. I'm telling you, a lot of your very senior top management who care about culture in the organization will really appreciate this being included in the audit program, right? Then, you talk about analyzing information related to culture gathered for the purpose of the organization, right? What is that? Surveys. How many times do you take employee surveys and analyze what's going on? We rarely do that. In our audits, do we take employee surveys? We don't. Very rarely we take it. But when you look at a shop floor and you'll say, my equipment is not really good that I work on. If you consistently see that trend, what does it tell you? It indicates something. That either we have a competitive disadvantage. Maybe a Maruti is doing it better and a Tata is not doing it better, or maybe a Tata is doing it better and a Maruti is not doing better. We need to kind of buck up on our technology. Employees don't seem to be happy. That could be something that you can actually find some valuable insights that tell you whether management is actually really thinking about the underlying problems which could cause ultimately profitability, cultural or other bad behaviors in the organization. So that's something that you need to start paying attention to, right? And then culture-related trainings. We spoke about, code of ethics. Now, I think section 406 in SOX, right? They have actually introduced an attestation for code of ethics. And if you actually change the code of ethics, you have to go and report to the SEC. So they have taken it that seriously. Even a change, like a director change, we file a form with ROC. But here in ethics change also, you have to go and file a form. So that's really good, isn't it? That's going to drive right behaviors in the organization, hopefully. Right? That's what we say. Okay. Additional considerations during the audit. Look at things like body language and reading the room. What do you get out of this? Right? Do you feel people are too aggressive when it comes to risk and managing risk and behavior? They don't care. They push you away. You noticed all of that in your own experience, but that tells you something about the organization. Right? Or a board of director, a member never appears in board meetings. Where is he? In London right now, Kingfisher. Every time board meeting is there, where is he? He's missing. What does that tell you of the culture of the organization? Right? So those are things that we've got to talk about very carefully here. Okay? Now.
Conducting a psychometric test and
Yeah? Oh, sorry.
apart from surveys,
Yeah.
having a psychometric test which you send out to
If your organization permits, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. It depends on the tool. See, these are only tools and techniques, but the question, underlying question is, do you even have the intent to do this? That is very important. Is this there even in your audit program to even consider culture and behavior? I think that's the point we are driving. There are several tools. You can call a lot of professionals, HR professionals. You can hire agencies to do this work, but is this within your program? That's very important to consider. You can start small by looking at even simple things like what type of trainings you conduct on behavioral risk. That's enough to start with. It will tell you about the organization. Some will turn up with 0. No budget. I worry. What's going on, behavior could be one of those things that become extremely important to inform. So they are very open. We assume they are not open because our mindset is predetermined that show them the P&L, show them the numbers, show them where the risk is in terms of numbers, they are very happy. It's not the case anymore. The world is changing, definitely changing. Yeah. Correct. Correct. Yeah.
because they put
Yeah.
the paper in the So my business gets affected.
Correct.
And some team are asking the people to come to office, some are not coming to office. The people working from home are having flexible time to work. People come to office as to manage their travel. So the variables,
Yeah.
the variables is very
Yeah.
complex here.
So I think what happens with these organizations, right, a lot of times we have seen is they sit down with people and say, what's optimal, for you all, and work out a plan, right? But now, this is more the operational aspect. Let's get to the behavioral aspect, right? Now, when you're talking about a very critical function, that should not, to Sir's point, that should not work from home. That needs to come right from the top, right? And say, this will not be accepted. Some of the other operational things is about how do you manage, right? It's less about, it's about your control over your team also sometimes, isn't it? They don't listen to me. That's hard to solve, right? That's more a personality question, right? But,
Internal auditors,
oh, yes, yes.
if I want to do an audit of process where the people are at office, I want to do an audit of process where people are home.
Home.
Auditors are getting stretched, right? So
They
they are
are.
at office and they are also be accounting the time. These guys will have a different time schedule. So this is
I'll give you an example, right? I mean, I know we are running over time, but we are taking questions as we go along, so we'll give about 3-4 minutes for questions. So I think it's a great point, right? See, I'll give you an example of where I work, right? We operate in about 50 markets, right, across the globe. And then we service a lot of that from our entity here in Chennai and Bangalore. We're about 60 auditors, or probably getting close to 70 now, that we have a team. Now, the challenge is absolutely similar. When, say, my team walks in on a given day, they'll say, I'm coming on Wednesday. Oh, but the auditee always says, I came on Tuesday. Because he doesn't want you to come and see him, right? That's why he says that. Maybe he's sitting there. But he says, I came on Tuesday and I went. Now, that's a real challenge. But this is where, this is such a new model that we are still adjusting. But this is a big stretch for us. Now, what is there that we need to start to watch out for, right? Are critical functions not appearing in the places where they need to be? That should, some of the others, okay, there's an IT guy who provides back-end support to fix laptops. It's okay, be at home. When I come to audit, you stay at home. I don't worry that much. Right, but there's some business guy who's dealing with, like we spoke to Sir, very confidential information, supposed to be in a glass room, not have information outside of the premise of the organization. There are groups like that, at least that we work with. Right? You can't. Right? Then if you start to see, oh, when we last interacted, he was not in office or she was not in office, that's a problem you raise immediately to management. It's not for you to solve. You immediately raise to management. The fact that you get stretched as an internal auditor, I don't think many organizations really solving this part of the problem, that, oh, how do I even audit this because the person doesn't even come to the office. But we've got to work out an arrangement. We've started to coin a new name. We call it dynamic auditing. That means what? You work out an arrangement where you all can meet together, actually run a 2-hour, 3-hour workshop and say, I know you won't come on other days, but when you come on this day, can you give us 2 hours? So that the stuff that we need to do face to face, we will get done. The rest of the time, we will send you queries, emails, and we'll get it sorted. So that's how we are evolving. I mean, in the similar situation like you, because we're operating in like so many markets, this is the new model that we have started to adopt as far as our organization is concerned. So just an example. Right? But it's tough. I fully agree with you. But don't miss on the critical stuff as an auditor. That one, absolutely don't compromise. Write in lead letters to the board, send it to them, the committees. That's it, send it. They'll listen to you because they worry more than you. Tomorrow if there's something on the newspaper, they're worried. Yeah? So that's extremely important. Okay. So, I think I've messaged, there are IIA standards. Yeah? If somebody tells you, go outside the room and somebody, did you hear about IIA standards? You have to say yes. Right? Okay, great. I think this is just to kind of summarize, remind how important this iceberg is, because you see a little at the top, so much at the bottom, right? The ecosystem, the environment, the values, the beliefs, all of this come into play. I always take his example because it's a nice one, that you have different levels of hierarchy. It's going to drive different values in the organization, right? And how do you kind of work around that in terms of your control infrastructure, which is so rigid, right? Sometimes we say this control is not there. Right? It's going to be very difficult to bring all of that together And then the invisible foundation of culture that's pervasive across, right? If you have great culture in the organization, you can expect good conduct, and definitely these are all interconnected with the behavioral risk at the end of the day. So my sort of conclusion is very simple, that don't lose sight of the last one, which is behavioral risk, because it comes from the foundational aspects of not having great culture or having good culture, and then that drives the behaviors, and that behavior could cause behavioral risk within the organization. I'll stop here and take questions.
So, my question is on the conduct assessment. So, since the start of 2023, we have been hearing a lot of news that people, the number of employees have been reducing. The company want to cut down the numbers, and this has impacted all the organization.
Correct.
Everybody is on the gas, and I'm using word this consciously. Management is mad in reducing the numbers.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we as an internal auditor, we are not getting that audit as culture, because from management perspective, that's not an important aspect.
Correct.
So from your point of view, how as an internal auditor we can address this issue? Because with our networking, we know that people are not very happy and
Yeah.
they are not very sure about their job.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And see, some of the things goes back to where is management making reductions, right? That's a very important aspect, sir, because it's actually a great question, right? Because we are living in the times that this is actually happening, isn't it? Now, suppose, God forbid, they start to reduce the size of your internal audit function. They say it's a cost to the organization. That mindset, right? It's a cost to the organization. What happens? It's an immediate sort of alarm bell, right? And a lot of regulators around the world have now actually taken cognizance of this fact to say, if you size down there, you got to let us know before you size down. At least the ones that are having greater impact on the public at large, right? Some of those companies. Second thing is, as an auditor, you've got to sort of keep, especially at this time, on the HR metrics. You've got to see what areas, what profile, and then what sort of employees are actually being sent away. Because this is, you will not be able to publish a report right in between this, right? You have to come off and say, where did we have bad behaviors? You know, so a lot of these CEOs, when they came out after this, oh, we should not have done it this way. They never spoke about impact on profitability. They never spoke about impact on P&L, customer value, nothing. What did they speak about? We should not have done it this way because this was such a behavioral impact on the employees, right? So I think you've got to watch the areas, the manner, done in line with policy, and bring about the fact that you're going to have a survey at the end of it. Analyze the survey results very, very carefully, which we don't do in the past. Analyze that, bring that back to the management and tell them, look, this is what we see as a result of what you've done. And then the one important thing that at least we do in our organization is that as a result, are the good performers leaving? Right? I lost a critical sales guy. I lost a critical risk management guy. And if that exit interview leans back to some of this, they'll probably realize. And that's what most of the companies have begun to realize, that their top talent is actually insecure. They're saying if performance is not an issue and only profitability is what my organization is focused on, then my organization does not drive great performance culture. It only drives a profitability culture. And that's exactly the outcome of your report. Do we drive performance culture or do we drive a profitability culture? It's really tough to construct this, but you will have to use data which will tell you an amazing story. So keep on top of that data is what I would recommend, if available, of course. Yeah. See, performance is not always tied with profitability, right? That's what I'm saying. So you could have a company that is not making money, but you have a great engineer that is developing software and has done really well. Do you want to retain him and take a bit of hit rather than saying, I want to maintain my profitability always at 20%? Now, if you keep that engineer, maybe, just for example's sake, your profitability goes to 19%. Are you willing to keep it at 19 for some time so that I protect my employee. When the environment changes, they are the ones who are going to bring value back to the company. So that's how I would say performance focused versus profitability focused. Because the top guys doing well will get paid the most. So if you get them out, your profitability improves. Some areas is difficult, right? I fully agree with you. But what you've got to keep in mind is it solely profit driven? We are talking about culture now. We are not going to numbers. So what's the organization doing with its culture in that form, right? Again, very difficult to answer these, isn't it? Because what's the right formula to get, who knows? But we've got to be on top of it to the point Sir made, that are we focused on the right areas and coming out with the right messages? Now, what the company does, they will still do. I mean, whatever Sundar Pichai does in terms of taking people out, that's his call, right? That's a company's call, that's company. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not right. That for them to decide, their board to decide, not for us. And we will not have any comments on that. But the point really is, what have you done? That's it. Tone from the top. Sir, sorry.
Yeah, this sounds very interesting and promising, but as auditors, we are used to checking something which is documented.
Yes.
So if I am promising my stakeholders I'll do a culture audit, so this, I'm sure this must be actually very challenging.
Very challenging. So we actually do something called, if I can just give you an example, we do something called a behavioral risk assessment in our organization, and we've just kicked it off. It's called a 2+2, right? So we train our auditors to go off and say, find 2 good behaviors and find 2 bad behaviors, in your view, right? And put that down. And then what we'll do at the end of the quarter, we'll collect all of this together and just try and do a trend across and see, does everybody in the organization feel a particular way, and is that a pattern? That's just a start we have made. And then, when you do root cause analysis of issues, right, you can't actively audit the culture, but when you do the root cause analysis of issues across, right, do you find a theme that there is an employee sort of behavior or lack of employee engagement, or there's a lack of training, lack of communication with employees? Can you pick that up? If you can pick that up, that will be a great value add, because that's something management is finding very hard to pick up. Because HR themselves don't do an audit across, right? We are privileged to be able to do that. So can we pick up that theme? That's food for thought. Now, because I can't speak for every organization because I don't know how they are structured, but that can be quite powerful, and that's why I was telling him, keep close to the data. It will tell you a story. It will tell you a story. There is no way data will not tell you a story. But its ability to pick it up and then report it from the lens of impact on behaviors or impact on culture should help you. Give it a try, we'll see. Lot of questions. Okay. I desperately want to end only for you guys.
It's so interesting that we want to continue. Yeah, but I'll not take much time. There were some of the MDs and CEOs that I have interacted with and presented my audit report. So when we discuss the root cause and we say it's process or system, some of the MDs have a very, very strange perspective, saying that for you, or maybe once when you go to audit committee, you can say this crap, it's process or system. For me, even this process or system lapse, this has happened because of a people issue.
Fantastic.
So he said that I can understand your reporting responsibility, you cannot be, but you go to audit committee, you say whatever technical things you want to say, but when you come to my cabin, you tell me who was supposed to fix the process gap and who was supposed to fix the system bug or implement a system. And then he says that your audits tell a lot of issues, but you never give me a behavioral input as to what a particular department, when you reached out to that department, what was the level of cooperation?
Correct.
Did you find guys or senior process owners, with a very lethargic attitude?
Fantastic.
So,
body language.
Body language and all. Finally, he said that you give me a matrix wherein you have audited now for 2-3 years, right? Over the last 2-3 years, you give me a trend as to, just forget about your observations and all. Just tell me what has been the culture you have seen. Have there been instances where people have cooperated with you, not cooperated with you? Has there been an occasion wherein they say that they are passing the buck to a different department?
That's a great one.
Saying that, he has done that, he has done that. Finally, he says that I want you to discuss with HR, and why don't you have that for each of these, maybe, head of departments, one of their KRAs should be that, how well they have done in the audits that you conducted, what was the audit score, and so.
Great. So we have something like that in our bank as well. We call it the management control assessment. We actually send that on a quarterly basis to the head of the organization. Say we're doing credit cards, for instance, right? At Standard Chartered Bank, we do credit cards. So we'll send it to the head of credit cards division and say, this is the assessment of what we've seen across, much to the point that he said. So if there are instances of things that we didn't like in terms of what the culture was, we would actually report it. But it's very hard to find. See, the most important thing there is, what he said is, who did not do what? Right? Keep that in mind. That will help you. Who did not do what? Because then you bring the responsibility question. He was the process owner or he was the risk owner, he passed the buck. So who did not do what? He did not do what he was supposed to do. So you bring out that behavioral assessment quite quickly within what you do. Right? So I think with his example, right, it's kind of given you a bit of reassurance. Right? That not only me, somebody else is also feeling like that. Gives me a bit of reassurance that this topic was not strange after all. Somebody is with me. Isn't it? Yes, sir. The question only at the expense of everybody's lunch. So it should be a good question. Just joking. Yeah. Correct.
Internal auditor will come into perspective because this is more of a reporting currently, and it is only given for 1,000 companies which is supposed to report.
Correct.
Right? So do you think that the role of internal auditor comes more into picture here where we can do internal audits on these indicators specifically as well?
It's a huge data input. That's what he was looking for. Right? It's a huge data point. So, while you will get excited to do the normal controls of how did you compile it, which system it came from, what is the IT control, did you drop some data, forget all of that. What is that telling you? Is there a problem? That is something you need to start to dig and unravel. Don't get stuck with these. I mean, you have to do what you have to do, right? You can't give up all the other. I'm not saying give up all the other controls. You still have to do, okay, if this report was produced, what is signed off, what is produced accurately, timely, data was correct, it was not fudged, all sorts of things. But when the result came out, what did you do with that result? You can bake that into your continuous monitoring effort. All of us do continuous monitoring, some sort of. You can bake that in. Quarterly that report comes out, annually that report comes out. Look at it, what was it last year, what happened this year, why did the score drop here, what is the company going through, we had a change in director, motivation dropped. What happened? Right? Lots of stories will happen. But if we don't start to think and only focus on the process element, we are finished. World is emerging. And that's why this was a topic that was picked up, because this is very new. It's still emerging. Standards are out. I've said that third time. Yeah? Standards are out. So we all need to go back, look at the standards, and start to focus on that. Right? So there is enough food for thought already provided by IIA, and then a lot of examples here already work in progress. Right? And some of them who are wanting to do more and more. Right? And so I was kind of looking at it and saying, this is new to me, but how do I do it? But that's the thought we need to go back with and say, okay, with these little tips and points that we take away, we can at least start thinking about it. I don't think we can solve the world's problem, but at least we can start to think about it in that way. You will definitely start to see impact on your audit committees, 100%. They will like it, if you do it well. It's always a caveat, okay? So with that, we can end?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think everybody will agree here that, along with the technical sessions, this is also very, very important in our day-to-day life. So we cannot just survive with our technical knowledge. What is also needed is such kind of softer things. We will have to be on top of it. And in today's context, this is going to be much more important than, technical aspects as well. So I'm sure all of you will agree with that. And with this, I'm going to thank on behalf of IAA for Sir for such a wonderful, session. Thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure.